Good afternoon. Question. How many of the people in this room were here 10 years ago at the launch of the OII? I think one or two were. Let's just have a show of hands. Oh, that's quite interesting. Yep, okay. Just picking up on what Ellie said, one of the people who came to that great meeting was someone who's taking over for me just in a few days' time as the chair of the advisory board of the Oxford Internet, is Richard Susskind. And I think it was Richard who said at that founding launch of the OII, and it's picking up exactly Ellie's point, that the key thing for the OII is not to be a cheerleader, but to be a thought leader. And I think if we keep that in mind over the next 10 years, the next 10 years of the OII will be every bit as successful as the last 10 years. I think when Bill asked me to speak, one of the things he thought I would do would say a little bit about the kind of local colour. How did it all come about? Well, that's quite a long story, and I'm not going to do all of that. Thinking about it, I was reminded of a conversation I had a great many years ago now with the Nobel Prize-winning economist Franco Modigliani. And he said, if you want to look forward 1 year, look back 10. If you want to look forward 10, look back 100. If you want to look back forward 50, look back 500. And I think that's not a bad starting point. And immediately, people have already referred to the creation of the printing press. I think if we're looking forward 50 years, you're back to Gutenberg to think about the scale of the changes that this is bringing about. But I'm not going to go back to 500. I'm just going to pick out the following points. One, just to remind you a little bit about what was happening in the early 90s. Wendy and Vince have already been there. In my case, what happened in terms of me finding, Balliol and Oxford is sometimes thought as being stuck in the 17th century or something like that. But actually, in Balliol, we had already, as early as 1984, we'd been experimenting with links to the British Library and the catalogue of the library. So we were already thinking about it. In 1994, I went to MIT and Harvard. And at the Kennedy School, I found they were running a fantastic seminar. The only puzzling thing was the title of the seminar. This is October 1994, just before Mosaic and the World Wide Web really hits the page, and after the JANET, the Joint Academic Network in the UK, has been going for a good many years, after JANET has taken up TCP/IP, after the Fat Pipe has been launched across America, and this course at the Kennedy School is called the National Information Infrastructure. The US at that stage thought the internet was national. Okay? Well, it clearly wasn't, and the people giving the course knew that it wasn't, and they changed the course name the next year. I sent an email back to someone in Oxford saying, is anybody in Oxford giving any lectures about the internet? Back came an email saying, lectures? Nobody knows what it is, Andrew. So I came back and started giving lectures about it, and that's how I got into it. Wind the clock on from the early 90s to the end of the 90s and beginning of the 2000s, and today is a rather extraordinary day for me because there are quite a lot of people in this room to who I owe huge thanks. They're not all here, but Mike Warburg, who's sitting down there, is part of the reason why Dame Seti, who's sitting down there, came to a meeting with me, and she came to a meeting with me because Derek Wyatt, who's sitting over there, had got me enthused about the World Internet Forum as he was then trying to launch. If you want to know about when the OII started, you could say it was the meeting that Derek had with the Vice-Chancellor of the University in June of 2000. But Derek and I went off, having talked to the VC, around Whitehall, and everybody said, oh, great idea, no money, sorry. Off to the Ministry of Trade, great idea, no money, sorry. But on the 13th of September 2000, I had a meeting with Dame Stephanie. And I'm hoping that there are no fellows of Balliol in the audience at the moment, because what I want to say... Oh, he is. What I want to say is that the conversation that morning for Dame Stephanie and her lawyer was a vastly more grilling interview than the fellows gave me about becoming master. Fired at me every conceivable kind of question. How will you maintain excellence? Have you already got a director? Where are you going to be in 10 years' time? What's the code name for the project? Well, 24 hours later, we had a code name for the project. It was called Mercury. And I think that actually, with getting that up into Quicksilver, fast, speedy, not bad. Yep. And the other small little requirement that Dame Stephanie had was, she said, we came out of that meeting, and the basic exit from the meeting was, Dame Stephanie would choose her own language, but what I took away was, I really am quite interested in this. Why don't you put in a bid showing me what you think Oxford could do with 5 million and what you could do with 10 million? And if you're going to get 5 million, you're going to have to match that with 5 from the government. If you're going to get 10 million, you're going to have to match that with 10 from the government. So I came out of that meeting just completely fired up. I was on the line in a different sense than being online, and I had to deliver. But I had to deliver within the constraints that Dame Stephanie said, I want to know, before any of this goes public in any way whatsoever, before my name is mentioned in any way whatsoever, that this is going to happen. The university is going to give the money, and the government's going to give the money. And I was reminded, long ago I worked in Whitehall, which is probably an advantage to me in getting this whole thing to work. And when I worked in number 10, I was told that there was a committee that was so secret that the reason why it was secret was secret. And I used that quite a lot over the following weeks around Oxford to try and get people, I'm going to tell you something, but bloody well keep quiet, right? Anyway, we did it. And I've thanked many people in this room, but there's one other person who's not here, who was a fantastic, and he was hoping to come. There's a guy called Tony Abrams, and he was the president of the MCR in Balliol, and he had helped with me. We'd helped do a seminar in Balliol, which got us interested in all this, and he then became the project leader, and he was absolutely fantastic. And I want to remind you that after the event, almost all successful innovations look obvious. They're not so obvious at the time. And Tony Abrams, in an email to me of a day or two ago, put his finger on this. He said, Andrew, do you remember one of the questions that the cynics in Oxford put to us? They said, you want to create an Oxford Internet Institute? Nobody in 1980 wanted to create an Oxford Fax Institute. Okay? All right. That's early 90s, early 2000s. Now, well, I think if you Google the OII, it's either top of the list or second on the list, pretty darn good. In that period, a completely new department of the university has been set up, a completely new doctoral program has been set up, a completely new master's program has been set up, and in the RAE of 2008, they got a 5-star, or equivalent to a 5-star rating. That's a pretty good success, and I think we ought to congratulate Bill Dutton. Wind it forward 10 years, 50 years, I don't know. There are all sorts of things that could be on the policy agenda, but I was thinking of one that actually nobody, I think, has really pinned down. And I've been in the States recently and reflecting on it. And I think one of the things that is going to be on our agenda and ought to be on the OAI's agenda is what I would call either information warfare or cyber sleuthing. American companies are terrified about what the Chinese are doing in this area. Now, I want to unpack that notion of information warfare or cyber sleuthing in at least two dimensions. It ought to be unpacked in many dimensions, but I've only got a few moments. Unpack it, first of all, into the diplomatic area and the commercial area. In a two-sentence version, I'm not worried about the cyber sleuthing in the diplomatic world, because I think on balance, big project here for some historian, but on balance, more bad wars have broken out because of parties not understanding what people were thinking of doing than of understanding what people were thinking of doing. So I actually think that the foreign service and the intelligence agencies knowing what each are really thinking makes the world a less risky place. What about the commercial area? I think that's also very interesting. And you then go back to a little bit of economic analysis. And the little bit of economic analysis is that if you have intellectual property rights, you get lots of investment in research, but you get under-dissemination of research. If you don't have intellectual property rights, you get too little investment in research, but you get fantastic dissemination. So if there's going to be lots of cyber sleuthing, there's going to be much more dissemination, but rather less research. Or societies are going to have to solve this in ways that they otherwise have done by funding centrally public research. But that's just not rather in the climate of the world at the moment. So I don't think the cyber sleuthing, information warfare in this commercial area is necessarily a bad thing. It's not a zero-sum gain. It might be China's gain and America's loss, but it isn't a zero-sum game because there will be much more dissemination of research. So that I would put down that as an area of major further work. And I want to end by saying that in terms of creating the OII, when Dame Stephanie and I talked on that 13th of September, there were the following things I thought were absolutely key. One is it ought to combine research and policy. Two, it had to be grounded on good academic research, and that's why it must be the thought leader and not the cheerleader. And three, it absolutely had to be multidiscipline. It shouldn't be captured by one discipline, it shouldn't be captured by one college in Oxford, and it shouldn't be captured by one big donor, one commercial donor with proprietary instincts. And we haven't had that. So the OII is free of those commercial pressures, free of discipline capture. And I think that is what makes it distinctive in the world and what's been just sort of fantastic fun for it to come about. And then I end by going back to Modigliani and saying, keep in mind, on the one hand, the history, and then keep in mind always the deep analysis that good academics will bring to the table. And that's not just internet. That's good lawyers, good political scientists, good computer scientists in a university environment, but combining to think about the internet. Thank you very much.